Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 in our study of the book of Genesis. Genesis 1, verse 1 begins, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." When we read that, and especially when that would have been read for the first time, I take it back in the days of Moses, those words would not have been entirely unfamiliar to the culture of the people living in that day. There were other creation myths, particularly one that came from Mesopotamia. This Babylonian creation account is known as the Enuma Elish. It was originally found on 7 tablets, although other versions have been found on 10 tablets, so there wasn't anything special about the 7 tablets, just happenstance. And it tells the story of 2 primal gods, Aspu and Tiamat, and they were sort of husband and wife, and they were doing whatever gods do. And at the beginning of this account, it starts off when the sky was not named and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name. Now notice 2 things. First of all, that the sky and the earth are first mentioned in the opening verse, much as we would see in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, the heavens and the earth. And the other thing that I want you to notice is the importance that is placed upon naming those things. That is, the Babylonian creation account really isn't a creation account because it doesn't start off with the sky being created or the earth being created, but it starts with those things being named. Now that's a little bit different than what we read here in Genesis. The story goes on to say, "And the primeval Apsu, who begat them, and Chaos Tiamat, the mother of them both," that's like I said, the husband and wife. And notice that's mentioned the chaos in the very second verse of the account. "Their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen. When of the gods none had been called into being." So at the outset, before any of the other gods come into being, there's these 2 gods, and there's heavens, and there's earth, and there's chaos, and there's waters. There's enough there that sounds a little familiar to our ears as we read Genesis chapter 1. As we follow the story of the Enuma Elish, the story goes on where chaos erupts with the creation of other gods, because these other gods are sort of noisy, and they, Aspu is killed, and Tiamat takes a new husband, Kingu, and Marduk, one of those newer gods, fights Tiamat and uses her corpse to fashion the earth and the sky. Subsequently, what happens is that Marduk kills Kingu, and from his blood he creates man. Man is created so that he will be able to sort of work the earth and till the soil. And the Sabbatu, now that's not the same thing as the Sabbath, although it sounds very much like it. The Sabbatu is established as an observance. Now the Sabbatu refers to the full moon that appears once a month, where the moon goes through different phases, but once a month it seems to all be there, and it comes to sort of a rest during that one night out of 1 month. And the Babylonians referred to that as the Sabbatu. Now, when we compare the Enuma Elish with the Genesis account, in the Enuma Elish, Tiamat engulfs the world in a primeval chaos. In the Genesis account, right at the beginning, the world is sort of in chaos. It's unformed and it's unfilled. In the Enuma Elish, light comes from the gods. In the Genesis account, God brings light into existence. In the Enuma Elish, Marduk, that's that junior god who defeats Tiamat, Marduk makes the stars of the zodiac and ordains the year. In the Genesis account, it's God who sets the sun and moon for signs, seasons, days, and years. But notice that both accounts address all of these things. In the Enuma Elish, Marduk makes man from the blood of Kingu. In the Genesis account, God creates man in his own image and likeness. In the Enuma Elish, Marduk commands the horns to determine 6 days, the 7th day to divide the crown, and the 14th day to be the Sabbatu. Remember, that's when the moon is full. In the Genesis account, God creates in 6 days, and then he rests on the 7th day, which he appoints as a Sabbath. So even the appointment of special days, that is in both accounts. Now, what I believe is happening when we compare the Enuma Elish with the Genesis account is that Moses is giving to us a refutation of the accepted mythos, the mythology of the day that was held in antiquity, as he goes through that mythology point by point to show that God is the true creator of heaven and earth. So Genesis is a corrective to the wrong beliefs of that generation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Notice the word God. The Hebrew word there is Elohim. Now, that's plural. The way you say it, singular, would be El. But it's not that God's created, because it is accompanied by a singular verb. Verbs in English don't carry number, but they did in Hebrew. So I guess if we were literally translated, we would say, in the beginning, God's, but it's not really plural, but I'm going to say that anyway. In the beginning, God's, he created, because there's only one, even though we were speaking of him in the plural. So the question is going to come up, why is this phrase Elohim used in the plural? And that's going to be very common in the Hebrew Bible. More often than not, instead of referring to God as El, we will see him referred to as Elohim with that plural usage. There have been some who thought, well, maybe that's a hint of the Trinity. And I suppose that could be considered a possibility. But most scholars think that instead what we have here is a plural of majesty. That is, when you want to describe something as very big and very majestic, then you speak of it in the plural. In fact, it goes on to say he created the heavens, the Shamayim, and the earth, because the heavens, well, they're pretty big too. This teaches us the existence of God. Notice it does not begin with a number of points detailing who God is. It just assumes God's existence. It also teaches us the existence of one God, even though it's a plural usage. It's accompanied by a singular pronoun in the verb, so that we're speaking not of many gods, but only of one. And finally, it teaches us the pre-existence of God. That is, in the beginning, God was already there to create the heavens and the earth. Finally, it teaches us the personhood of God. That God is not being described as just a force that is bringing things to bear, but that he is actively involved in doing something. He is creating. Now that word created, bara, is the Hebrew word that's used, and that describes this creative action. As I said, the Enuma Elish puts a great emphasis on naming something, naming the heavens, naming the earth. And certainly that was an important aspect to the ancient world, and even an important aspect to the Hebrews, because we're going to see considerable force used in when things are being named. But we don't read here that in the beginning God named the heavens and the earth. Instead, he is creating. And so this is his creative act that's being described. Now there's two ways of understanding this creative act. First of all, we could understand this as an initial act of creation in which God created the heavens and the earth, and then what follow in days 1 through 6 are his further organizing what was originally created. Or we could see this as a summary statement of the entire chapter. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and let me tell you how he did that, verses 2 through the end of the chapter. in the beginning God created, and notice the heavens, ha-shamayim, and the earth, aretz. The heavens, it's actually a dual form, not a plural. Sounds a little bit like the plural, but it's dual. The up there places, and you can sort of point in one direction and point to the other. As long as you're pointing up there, you're pointing to the heavens. My own theory on this word, it sounds very much like the word sham, which just means over there. And so it's as if God is saying he created the up there places, and then he created the down here place, the earth. Although when we say the word earth, we think of a globe or a planet. And when they said the earth, they thought of the land, the place down here where I'm at right here. They weren't thinking globally. And so this is very anthropocentric. It's terra-centric. It's sort of dealing with where they're at and speaking, remember, in the language of the day.